I'm staying with Jasper now. I've already liquidated our retirement accounts. My name is Evelyn Marlowe, 46 years old, sitting at my kitchen counter in Boise, watching my husband of 18 years smiling on my phone screen. He panned the camera to show off a luxury watch that must have cost thousands. Behind him was a hotel suite I didn't recognize. Certainly not his brother's modest apartment in Portland where he was supposedly visiting. "Don't worry," he said, champagne glass tilting dangerously. I typed a simple response. Wise decision. He wouldn't understand what I meant. Not yet, but he would. I walked to my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a folder containing bank statements, investment documents, and legal papers I'd gathered over the past 4 months. The evidence of my quiet preparation for exactly this scenario. The weight of the folder felt like a shield, each page a step toward reclaiming my future. The new clothes, the fitness trainer who texted at odd hours, the weekends away that returned him looking more distant than refreshed. I said nothing. Instead, I began to prepare when I took on a major consulting contract for Cloud Peak IT 3 years ago. I created a separate LLC for liability purposes. Every weekend away, every late night, every unexplained purchase, they were steps toward this moment, toward Jasper, whoever he was. "You'll land on your feet." I did. I set my phone down and looked around our house. The modern furniture Raymond had insisted on buying 2 years ago. The framed photos from vacations where he'd always seemed restless. The expensive kitchen renovation that never quite satisfied him. I'd spent nearly 2 decades building a life with a man who could record himself laughing while dismantling that same life. The realization didn't hit me like a shock, more like confirmation of something I'd felt in my bones but hadn't wanted to face. It was as if the house itself whispered the truth I'd ignored, each polished surface reflecting his absence. As an IT systems consultant, I'd built a career on noticing small inconsistencies, things that didn't align, anomalies in data that signaled bigger problems. And for months, I'd been noticing them at home. The weekend trips to see friends that got extended by a day, credit card charges at restaurants in neighborhoods he never mentioned visiting, text messages that made him smile in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I picked up my phone again and watched the end of the video. Raymond's perfect white teeth, his carefully styled hair, the confidence of someone who believed they'd won. He'd always treated our marriage like a game, but I hadn't known the stakes until now. Raymond had always found financial discussions boring. He'd sign whatever I put in front of him, never asking questions beyond whether we were doing okay. It was the one area of our marriage where he'd completely trusted me. That trust was about to become the most expensive mistake of his life. I met Raymond when we were both 28. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, all charm and polish, while I managed IT infrastructure for a regional bank. Our courtship was brief, 6 months from first date to wedding day. Everything about him felt electric compared to my methodical nature. "We balance each other," he used to say. "You plan, I live." For years, that balance worked. I built our financial security brick by brick, maxed out retirement accounts, invested in growth stocks that performed well, bought our home when interest rates bottomed out, created spreadsheets tracking every expense. Meanwhile, Raymond brought spontaneity, weekend trips, dinner parties, the social connections that helped me land bigger consulting contracts. His charisma opened doors, but my diligence ensured we walked through them prepared. The first crack appeared 5 years ago. I found a credit card statement with a $3,000 charge at a jewelry store. It wasn't near my birthday or our anniversary. "It's for my mother," he said when I asked. I nodded and said nothing. When his mother visited 3 months later, wearing no new jewelry, a quiet unease settled in me, but I pushed it aside. Then came the late nights at work events. I restructured our retirement savings. On paper, we had one main account in both our names, but I'd moved 70% of our assets to accounts tied to my business. Accounts Raymond had signed off on but never bothered to monitor. 8 months ago, I noticed a pattern of unexplained withdrawals from our joint checking account. Small amounts at first, then larger. When confronted, Raymond blamed online shopping. "You work so much," he said. "It helps me feel less lonely." Last month, he began asking questions about our retirement funds, how much we had, how accessible it was, whether I'd updated the beneficiaries. "Just thinking about the future," he said. I watched him scrolling through his phone that night, smiling at something I couldn't see. The gold watch I'd never bought him gleamed on his wrist. The pieces were there, a puzzle I'd refused to solve until now. The pieces were all there, I just hadn't wanted to see the complete picture. So, I moved more assets, secured more paperwork, and waited for what I knew was coming. After watching Raymond's video a second time, I sat in my home office and felt strangely calm. 18 years reduced to a 40-second clip, and a man I no longer recognized. I called our bank first. "Miss Marlowe, we were actually about to contact you," the fraud department representative said. "There's been some unusual activity on your joint retirement account." "I'm aware," I replied. "My husband has attempted to liquidate it without my knowledge or consent. I did not authorize this transaction." The representative's tone shifted from concern to action. "In that case, ma'am, we need to file a fraud report immediately. I can place a freeze on the account while we investigate. Please do." By the time I hung up, I'd set in motion what I knew would be the end of my marriage. Not the betrayal that had happened long before, but my response to it. A quiet strength surged through me, the kind that comes from knowing you've prepared for the storm. I pulled up the document I'd prepared months ago and never hoped to use. Divorce filing papers, partially completed, waiting for details I now had in abundance. I updated the dates, added the latest evidence, and saved the file to send to my lawyer in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. "Did you get my message?" I didn't respond. The freeze on the account would take effect within hours. The fraud investigation would follow, and Raymond would discover that his grand exit strategy had a fatal flaw. I walked through our house that night, really seeing it for the first time in years. How little of myself existed in these rooms. The furniture I hadn't chosen, the art that meant nothing to me, the kitchen where I rarely cooked anymore because Raymond preferred restaurants. I'd spent nearly 2 decades building a life around a man who'd been planning to discard me. In our bedroom, I opened his closet and noted what was missing. The expensive pieces, the favorites. He'd been moving out incrementally for weeks without me noticing. Or perhaps I had noticed but chosen not to see. I slept in the guest room that night on sheets that didn't smell like his cologne. The quiet of the room felt like freedom, a space untouched by his presence. When I woke up, I felt lighter than I had in years. Over coffee, I emailed the divorce filing to my lawyer with a request for urgency. Then I called Jill, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on a case of corporate fraud 2 years earlier. "I need to trace some financial activity," I told her. "And I need it documented for court." I didn't feel anger, not even hurt anymore, just clarity. Raymond had made his choice. Now I would make mine. 3 days after Raymond's video message, my phone exploded with notifications, text messages, voicemails, emails, all from him, all with increasing urgency. "What's happening with our account? Why can't I access the funds? The bank is saying something about fraud." I let them pile up without responding. My lawyer had advised minimal contact, and I was following that advice to the letter. Everything needed to be documented, clean, and by the book. On the 4th day, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Raymond standing there, his perfect appearance frayed at the edges. The confident man from the video was gone, replaced by someone with disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes. "What did you do?" he demanded, pushing past me into the house. I kept my voice level. I reported unauthorized access to our accounts. The bank froze the funds pending investigation. "Unauthorized?" He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I'm your husband. I have every right. The account required dual authorization for withdrawals over $10,000. You forged my signature on the paperwork. That's fraud, Raymond." His face changed, the mask slipping to reveal calculation beneath. "You can't prove that. The bank has the documentation, and I have your video helpfully explaining your intentions." He switched tactics then, moving closer, his voice softening. "Evelyn, this is just a misunderstanding. I was angry. I wasn't thinking clearly." I stepped back. "You were clear enough to plan this for months. Clear enough to pack your favorite clothes. Clear enough to forge documents. We can work this out," he said, reaching for my arm. "Whatever you think happened with Jasper." "I filed for divorce," I interrupted. "The papers will be served to you today. This conversation needs to happen through our lawyers." The mask dropped completely. "You'd have nothing without me," he hissed. "I built your social connections. I made you look successful. You were just some boring IT woman before me." I almost smiled at how predictable this was. "And yet somehow I managed to protect our assets from your attempt to steal them." "Imagine that." His eyes narrowed. "The retirement account had over $800,000. "It had $180,000, I corrected, which the bank has now frozen. The withdrawal has been flagged as potentially criminal activity." What about the rest? Our portfolio was worth over $1 million. Now I did smile. You never did pay attention during our financial discussions. Understanding dawned slowly on his face. He walked to the kitchen counter and picked up his phone, frantically opening banking apps and entering passwords. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Where's the rest of our money?" "In accounts you signed the paperwork for but never bothered to monitor. Accounts tied to my LLC, which you have no access to without my authorization." The look he gave me then was pure hatred. "You planned for this?" I shook my head. "I protected us from financial risk when I took on the Cloud Peak contract. Standard business practice. The fact that it also protected our assets from you is just, what would you call it? A wise decision." He threw his phone at the wall. It bounced off harmlessly and clattered to the floor. "You think you've won? Jasper has money. He has connections." "Then you've landed on your feet," I said, using his own words. "But you'll be doing it without the retirement funds you tried to steal, and given the fraud investigation, possibly with a criminal record." He left an hour later after more threats and several attempts to access my laptop. I changed the locks that afternoon. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a case study in desperation. Raymond tried every approach: threats, tears, seduction, legal intimidation. His lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit, sent demanding letters claiming I had hidden marital assets and engaged in financial misconduct. I forwarded each one to my attorney without comment. Meanwhile, Jill, the forensic accountant, was uncovering the full picture of Raymond's betrayal. "He's been siphoning money for almost a year," she told me during our meeting at her downtown office. She slid a folder across her desk. Small withdrawals at first, then larger amounts. Always just under the threshold that would trigger notifications to your phone. I opened the folder to find meticulously documented spreadsheets, credit card statements, cash withdrawals, money transfers. In total, he's diverted approximately $87,000 from your joint accounts, Jill continued. Most of it went to personal expenditures, designer clothing, jewelry, high-end restaurants. "But here's where it gets interesting," she said, pointing to a highlighted section. "About $20,000 went directly to this account." She showed me transfers to an account I didn't recognize, held at a different bank. The account belongs to Jasper Whitmore, 41 years old, works as a regional manager for Voxen Audio. Has a history of relationships with wealthy married women. I looked up. "You found all this? How?" Jill smiled thinly. "I'm very good at my job, and Mr. Whitmore isn't very good at covering his tracks. This isn't his first rodeo with a soon-to-be ex-husband's finances." Something cold settled in my stomach. Not just betrayal, then something calculated, targeted. "The timing is what you should note," Jill added. "The transfers to Whitmore began 3 months after he was hired at Voxen, the same company where your husband's pharmaceutical sales territory expanded last year." I remembered Raymond's excitement about the new client addition, how he'd mentioned the innovative audio technology company expanding into medical device territory, how he'd suddenly needed more evening meetings and weekend conferences. "There's more," Jill said, turning a page. "Whitmore has done this before, twice that I can document. Both times with sales representatives from companies his employer partnered with. Both times involving significant financial transfers before a dramatic exit from the marriage. The pieces clicked into place, a chilling pattern emerging from the data." "Does he know?" I asked. Jill shrugged. "Hard to say. He might be complicit, or he might be another victim. Either way, he's been moving your money to him for months." I thought about Raymond's confident smile in that video. The new watch, the designer suits, the way he'd laughed while telling me he'd emptied our retirement. "He knows," I said quietly. "Maybe not everything, but enough." Before leaving Jill's office, I had one more question. The account liquidation he attempted. Could Whitmore have coached him through that? Jill nodded. "Almost certainly. The paperwork was forged, but professionally, and the timing immediately before a holiday weekend suggests someone familiar with banking procedures. Someone who knew it might delay fraud detection. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated heist. I thanked Jill and left with the folder of evidence. On the drive home, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about saving my assets anymore. It was about stopping a predator and possibly, though I barely admitted it to myself, about saving Raymond from his own worst decision. With Jill's evidence in hand, I met with my lawyer, Diane Green, in her downtown office. The wide windows overlooked the Boise skyline, but I barely noticed the view as we discussed strategy. "This changes things significantly," Diane said. reviewing the documents. "We have evidence of systematic financial misconduct, possible conspiracy, definitely fraud." I nodded, watching her experienced eyes scan the numbers Jill had compiled. "We have 3 paths forward," she continued. "First, we proceed with the divorce as planned, using this to ensure favorable asset division. Second, we file criminal charges against both your husband and this Whitmore individual. Or third," she looked up, meeting my eyes, "we use this information as leverage." "Leverage for what?" "To get everything you want in the divorce settlement, and possibly to recover the funds already transferred." I considered this, turning the options over in my mind. "What about Whitmore's previous victims? The other men?" Diane raised an eyebrow. "You're concerned about them. If he's done this repeatedly, he'll do it again. The pattern matters." My lawyer leaned back in her chair. "We could potentially reach out to their attorneys, share information, build a stronger case." The idea of stopping Whitmore felt like a duty, a way to turn my pain into something larger than myself. I made my decision then. Start with the leverage, prepare for criminal charges if necessary, and connect with those other attorneys. Within days, we had a coordinated approach. 2 of Whitmore's previous targets had agreed to share their experiences and financial records. The pattern was unmistakable, the predatory nature undeniable. Meanwhile, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I contacted the fraud department at our bank with the complete documentation. They escalated the case immediately, expanding the investigation to include Whitmore and the suspicious transfers. I also reached out to Vox and Audio's corporate compliance officer, an anonymous tip, at first suggesting they investigate potential conflicts of interest in their regional management team. Just enough to start them looking in the right direction. Then I waited, not passively but strategically. I monitored account activity. I documented every communication from Raymond. I prepared my home by removing anything of sentimental value to me, securing important documents, and changing all passwords. 7 days after my meeting with Diane, Raymond's tone changed abruptly. His texts shifted from accusatory to concerned. "We need to talk. It's important. Please call me back. I think I've made a terrible mistake. There are things about Jasper you should know." I didn't respond but forwarded each message to Diane. 2 days later, Raymond appeared at my office building as I was leaving work. He looked shaken, the confident sheen completely gone. "He's not who I thought he was," he said, falling into step beside me. "Jasper has been lying about everything." I kept walking toward the parking garage. "That seems to be going around." "I'm serious, Evelyn. He's done this before, used men for their money. I just found out from his ex-partner." I stopped and turned to face him. "I know. So does our lawyer. So does the bank's fraud department. So does his employer's compliance team." His face went pale. "You knew." "I had a forensic accountant trace every dollar you've transferred to him over the past year, all $87,000 of them. We've connected with his previous victims. We have the complete pattern of behavior documented." He seemed to sway slightly. "Evelyn, I didn't know. You have to believe me." "Actually, I don't have to believe anything you say anymore, Raymond. That's the one benefit of all this." I turned and continued walking, leaving him standing in the office plaza as the autumn sun began to set. The weight of his betrayal lingered, but walking away felt like shedding a chain I'd carried too long. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. My lawyer had prepared me thoroughly, but nothing could have readied me for the sight of Raymond and Jasper sitting together at the respondent's table. He looked diminished somehow. Jasper looked annoyed. They'd arrived together despite the mounting evidence against him, despite everything Raymond now knew. I wondered what hold he still had over him. Our case was called. The judge, an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses, reviewed the documents before her with methodical attention. "Before we proceed," she began, "I understand the plaintiff has submitted additional evidence regarding financial misconduct." Diane stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have documented systematic fraud, including forged authorization documents and transfer of marital assets to a third party." She presented the comprehensive file, the bank statements, the forged paperwork, the video Raymond had sent, admitting to liquidating our retirement accounts, the transfers to Whitmore's personal account, and the final piece testimony from Whitmore's previous targets, describing the identical pattern of behavior. I watched Whitmore's face as this evidence was presented. The annoyance shifted to calculation, then to barely concealed panic. When the judge directed her attention to him, he leaned over to whisper urgently to his attorney. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said sharply, "this court has evidence suggesting you may have engaged in a pattern of financial exploitation." While that's not the primary matter before me today, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation. Raymond made a small sound beside him. Not quite a gasp, more like the air going out of his last hope. The judge continued. Given the evidence of financial misconduct, I am freezing all disputed assets pending final resolution. And Mr. Marlowe, you should be aware that the court takes a very dim view of attempts to hide or transfer marital property. The gavel's echo felt final, a line drawn between the life I'd known and the one I was building. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new condo in downtown Boise, watching the sunset paint the city gold. The divorce was finalized, the financial matters settled. The legal system had run its course. In the end, Raymond had turned on Whitmore, providing evidence that helped the district attorney build a stronger case against him, whether from self-preservation or genuine remorse. I never asked. The criminal charges against him were reduced in exchange for his cooperation. He avoided jail time but would be making restitution payments for years. Last I heard, he'd moved back to his hometown in Oregon, taking a lower-level sales position with a different company. Whitmore hadn't fared as well. With 3 former victims testifying against him, plus Raymond's evidence, he was facing significant time for fraud and financial exploitation. I recovered most of our assets, not all. Some things, once broken, can't be made whole again, but enough to rebuild. My consulting business had grown during this time. Ironically, crisis has a way of clarifying priorities, sharpening my focus on what truly mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrea, a project manager I'd been seeing for a few weeks. Smart, straightforward, with her own consulting firm and a refreshing honesty about what she wanted in life. We were taking things slowly, both carrying our own histories. Still on for dinner, her message read. Looking forward to it, I replied. I went inside to change, passing the single photograph I'd kept from my marriage. Raymond and me on our honeymoon, both smiling, both believing in the future we thought we'd share. I didn't keep it out of sentimentality or regret, just as a reminder that trust should be earned continually, not given completely. The retirement accounts were now solely in my name. The passwords changed, the paperwork clear. The view from my balcony stretched toward a horizon I now defined. A life rebuilt on my terms, stronger for the lessons carved into its foundation.